Welcome everyone. I'll call to order this work session. Mary, our mayor, is out sick, so asked me to get us started. I will hand it over to our assistant city manager, Zach.
Thank you, city manager and council. We have Baker Tilly here, and I have Jamie, HR manager. She'll talk a little bit about the process, and then she'll hand it over to Baker Tilly to do a quick presentation, and then Q&A at the end if you have any questions.
So we've formed a compensation classification committee back at the beginning of the year. It consists of representatives from all of the city services and departments. So we have a good mix of people to help us through this big project. Our original meetings were just kind of talk through the process, and then we shortlisted a number of consultants that we interviewed. They came and did a presentation and got it narrowed down to Baker Tilly here. So I've actually worked with Lexi in the past. I'll let them introduce themselves here, but I worked with Lexi in county government, so I know her from those days. So she knows government very well just from that perspective because she worked in it. And then Laura can give her own introduction here too. But so far they've been a fantastic team to work with. There's other cities that I've talked to have worked with them and got positive feedback. So I'm going to hand it over to these two, though. They're going to present kind of what the whole timeline is going to look like and what to expect over the next handful of months.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Jamie. And second, thank you all. Before I begin, I just want to truly thank the city for the opportunity to work on this engagement. We're really excited, and we've had a great relationship so far, so looking forward to working on this engagement and seeing it through to the end. This one, okay. Oh, okay. It's the wheel, sorry. Like Jamie mentioned, my name is Laura Linehan, and I'm based in the St. Paul, Minnesota office. Like Lexi, I have experience in local government, human resources as well. I'm a certified compensation analyst. I have my PHR, my professional human resources certification, and also my certified labor relations professional designation through the National Public Employee Labor Relations Association. So I'll be working on this engagement with Lexi as well, who, like Jamie mentioned, has extensive experience in county human resources as well as city government work as well. These are a couple of our team members who may be working on this engagement as well. Jada Kent up at the top is the practice leader of our entire team. She's a certified compensation professional, and all of the tools that we use for our process were developed by certified compensation professionals. Thomas Patton is going to be leading the position analysis questionnaire process for the city. So his name will come up as well. He's currently based in Denver, Colorado, but don't worry, he's actually born and raised in Minnesota and will be returning shortly. So you've got your entire Minnesota team who are working on this engagement. A couple of other of our team members, Sarah's our project manager, so she kind of coordinates all of our other projects, and then we've got a couple other team members with extensive experience in both local government and compensation as well. This is kind of a graphic representation of our project overview. So right now we're in that project initiation phase. So we've had several planning meetings to really establish the goals of the study. And we're also in process of doing that data collection. So Jamie just recently provided an entire employee census. We're also working on getting job descriptions, department head questionnaires, policies, procedures, union contracts, really any type of data related to classification and compensation that we may need as we work through this project. We'll also be doing leadership presentations with the department heads, like Jamie and Zach mentioned. There is a very strong representation from that kind of compensation team, but we'll also be doing a formal presentation to other leadership members as well. We also will then do an employee presentation. It's often very similar to the leadership presentation and actually looks similar to the presentation you all are seeing today as well. And that's where with employees we walk through the process and kind of how the project will go to really engage employees on the front end. We'll also be asking employees to participate in a position analysis questionnaire process, which is where they'll be telling us about the position and the nature and level of work that they do. It's an online document, so everybody will be able to complete it on their smartphones, on their laptops. If employees don't have access to an email, we can also coordinate a paper PAQ process, which we'll coordinate through Human Resources. Using those PAQs, we start doing our internal job evaluation. Many of you are probably familiar with this, but Minnesota local government pay equity law dictates that every position within an organization needs to have a point factor score for each of those positions to really ensure internal equity between positions. So the internal equity that we conduct, it was actually built for local governments. It's called SAFE, the Systematic Analysis Factor Evaluation Tool, and it's a proprietary tool that was developed to measure local government jobs using the 9 compensable factors that are on the screen. So using those PAQs, we will look at every single position within the organization and assign a point score to each of those positions. Additionally, we'll be reviewing positions for exempt and non-exempt status in accordance with the Fair Labor Standards Act. For the market, we'll be partnering with the city to determine which organizations should be used for the peer comparisons. So when we go out to the market and we use that peer list, we're asking organizations to really provide positions that are similar to positions with the city. So when we say similar and we say a good match, we're looking through a lens of 75% match in duties and responsibilities. We know that not every single local government job is going to be the same. There are uniquenesses for every single organization. So we use that 75% threshold when we go to market to ask organizations to match which positions are similar using that 75% threshold to their organizations. So we'll provide benchmarks and summary of work as well as minimum qualifications for education and experience and ask organizations to complete and fill out the market survey. When we're collecting that information, we are collecting base pay information only. This is a base pay information study. We don't take into account, overtime, stipends, anything like that. It's truly what is that base pay for the position with that 75% match in duties and responsibilities. We might do some adjustments to the data, a geographic adjustment for a geographic cost of labor. You might do some work week adjustments. So for example, if organizations are a 37.5 hour work week versus a 40, or this happens a lot, for example, in fire, a 53 work week versus a 40 versus a 56, depending on shifts. We'll make those data adjustments to truly make sure we're comparing that apples to apples salary data based on hours. We also may do some data aging if needed. We often do this with one of the published sources that we utilize, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because generally their data is a little bit behind, so we want to make sure that we age it for kind of where we are now in the market. No peer is more important than the other. So there's no, data weighting for, this peer is more important than the other. When the data comes in and is analyzed, it's really every peer has that same value. We also will collect pay practices and fringe benefits information and then do a benefits report that compares the city's offerings to what the market is offering for various benefits. We go through a very rigorous quality control process as well. So as we review the data, really looking through that lens of ensuring that quality control from a match perspective, from a data perspective, and really using our tools to then provide market results for the city. Once we have all of that information in hand, kind of that external equity and then the internal equity, we really start working on the actual pay plan development itself. So we can utilize existing pay structures if an organization is particularly fond of their current structures, or we can really scrap it and go forward with some new proposed offerings that really tailor to the market and to that internal equity. Again, using that SAFE system, we'll provide draft grade assignments for review, and we often recommend a meeting with department heads to really walk through those grade assignments to make sure that we've got everything right from an internal equity perspective. For example, making sure that if a supervisor is in one grade, the employees that they supervise are in grades below them to really ensure that internal equity. We then, once the grade assignments are finalized, will provide 3 implementation scenarios that help actually take this pay plan and apply it to the actual individual people. This is really the first time in the process we're looking at the individual people in the positions. Our goal of this study is to look at the position, not the person in the position. This isn't a study that talks about, how great somebody is at their job. It's about really getting that market value and that internal equity for every single position. So when we're working on the implementation scenarios, that's when then we're taking the people and figuring out how to best implement. We provide kind of 3 out-of-the-box scenarios, but then we'll of course work with Jamie and Zach and the rest of the team to figure out if there are other implementation scenarios that we can tailor depending on your organizational challenges and needs. We'll also then recommend changes to pay policies to really make sure that that roadmap of how to take those pay plans, the new pay plans going forward, and actually implement them and use them going forward is squared away. Then we're at project completion, where we do a final report. We will present to whoever wants to hear us talk about compensation. We often recommend actually doing a presentation to employees at the end. Considering they helped us on the front end with that position analysis questionnaire, want to make sure we kind of bookend that and present to employees. We'll present to leadership, council, whoever wants to hear us talk about compensation, we're there. We also will provide all of the documentation that we've received throughout this process, including the PAQs, then to city staff. And we'll also train city staff on how to use the system going forward. So the final deliverable, it's not a subscription service where, you can use this system for however many years at X dollar amount costs. It's truly a working document that the city can use to then grade positions going forward. It's Excel-based, it's got easy drop downs, and it just really all ties together so that you all can use the system going forward as new positions come into your organizations or perhaps positions substantially change where a review might be required. So here's kind of our project timeline. So we are, like I mentioned, in the data collection phase. So moving into July and August, we're still doing that data collection. We haven't launched that PAQ process formally yet, but looking at August, September for pay plan development and implementation calculations, and that's where budget information will be available. And then looking at wrapping up the project in September, October. So one thing I wanted to kind of give a little bit more deep dive into for you all is the employee's role in the study. So I've kind of mentioned this position analysis questionnaire, and what we will be doing is sending that position analysis questionnaire to every single employee in the organization, and employees have the opportunity to complete an online form that asks them all about their job. And this is from what's the minimum qualification for education, all the way to, what are, your lifting requirements, how often are you in poor working conditions. Employees will have the opportunity to complete this and then submit it for supervisor review. And when it's sent for supervisor review, I want to make sure I'm very clear. Supervisors are not able to change the initial responses from the employees. They're simply able to either agree, disagree, or add additional information with that supervisor review. And then once that's all completed, it's routed to Baker Tilly, and like I mentioned, we'll actually provide both of that, the supervisor and the employee responses for the city to keep once the project's done. Again, if employees need a paper version because they might not have an email address, kind of depending, you can absolutely, we can get them a paper PAQ. And also employees are able to work in groups. So if individuals are more comfortable doing kind of that 2 heads are better than 1 type of situation, certainly can work in groups to complete one. We just need to know on Baker Tilly's side that that's been completed. And employees can also download a copy of their PAQ response so that they have it. So with the leadership presentation and the employee presentation, we actually will be demoing the PAQ process. I won't do that here, but we'll be walking through with employees how the document works, kind of that user functionality, so everyone's really clear on kind of what they need to do. We take the PAQ process very seriously. When I say we use the PAQ for the basis of that job evaluation, we truly do. So we really ask and will be asking employees to take this process seriously and work diligently to make sure that we have at least 1 completed PAQ response for every single position in the organization. So that's always our goal. So this is kind of, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, because you are so reliant on that employee data, do employees necessarily go into this with trust that this process is in their interest? I worry that people would think what if this means my pay will be cut at some point and I shouldn't participate in giving complete answers?
Absolutely, and so one of the things actually, and I didn't include this in this presentation, but I appreciate you asking. We do have kind of an FAQ list that we provide as part of this presentation, and literally the first question on that PAQ is, are you going to cut my pay? Baker Tilly never recommends a pay decrease as a result of a study. It's not something we recommend, we never will. So if that instance would occur, like let's say an employee's maybe, outside of their pay range for some reason, what we would recommend in that situation, and we tell this to employees as well, as we were part of the presentation, is kind of that red circling, meaning you kind of freeze, maybe no more merit, but maybe still, that COLA adjustment until the market catches up. But we never recommend a pay decrease. We also articulate that in us using these PAQs, it's an opportunity for us to truly understand what your job is. So the more you can tell us about your job, the more we understand your impact, your independence, all of those 9 compensable factors to make sure that we're really capturing the job. And we also mentioned as well that, employee performance, this is also on the FAQ list, employee performance isn't part of this as well. It's truly the position, let's learn about the position, and that's for a different process and somebody else to do, but we don't look at employee performance at all. So this is where we're at now. We're in that data request phase, department head questionnaire phase. We've scheduled kind of the planning meeting with the initial team, and we've also scheduled bi-weekly meetings with the project team as well. So we're pretty on track, and we're starting to kind of work on now getting that leadership meeting scheduled and that PAQ process launched with the employee meetings. Sorry, I keep going the wrong way. This is our contact information. Like I said, Lexi and I will be on this project, and then Thomas will be running the PAQ process as well. So just wanted to make sure someone saw a face with the name for that PAQ process as well. And he'll be with us when we do employee presentations and leadership presentations as well, so employees know, if they end up sending a question, it's likely that he'll respond. Any questions?
Questions? I have a few quick. Just the first will this include all like part-time and seasonal positions as well? Okay, seeing a nod. Second is it seems like this might be outside the scope, but given our many conversations and priority around equity more broadly, is there either within this study, or it's sounding more like it would be an additional step that we might do internally, a way to compare, like, are there any disparities between like what people are making based on gender or race? Is that something that we could do with the data that comes out of this?
I think potentially, yes. You are right, that would be a separate analytical look at our pay practices in general.
Okay.
But it can be, we'd be able to get that done with what they'll provide and the data we already have.
Okay. And then my last question is, this is, it seems like is mostly based off of what others are paying for similar work. And I guess I'm curious if there's any, again, it seems like it might be an entirely separate conversation, but any aspect of this that looks at like, can someone actually, like if it's a full-time job, can someone actually live on that salary? In our area, is that, I guess if we're about to, I mean, often these lead to realizing a bunch of people's salaries are lower than they should be. And I think everyone should be paid what they deserve. And I think for any full-time positions, it's worth looking at, okay, can someone actually live off that? But it sounds like that would be another additional step.
Yeah, this study just really looks at the market, and we have we'll work together to decide who we're gonna be our comparisons. So that's really what the study's focused on, is just making sure we're paying at market along with all of our surrounding communities that we compete with. Just to make sure that we're not, the question about whether or not it's a livable wage, that's something we can do internally as well. I've had to look at that in the past when just when it comes to ACA, you have to do a lot of that analysis and what someone's wages, at the poverty level, whether or not we're providing affordable health care. So that's an exercise that can be done internally.
Maybe this is an additional question. We may find that there's not a large budget impact, but I imagine it's more common to find that there could potentially be a large budget impact to implement all the recommendations. Is it your experience with other cities you've worked with that it typically is like a multi-year process to implement?
So actually, when we are running these implementation scenarios, and that's probably where also custom tailoring some implementation scenarios to the specific needs of the organization kind of comes in. Obviously, the number one recommendation we sort of have out of those recommendations is what you can financially and sustainably afford, right? Always goal one. We actually don't recommend a multi-year approach to implementation, and the reason for that is because if you're using market data that is now. Market data, as I'm sure is not going to be a surprise to anybody in this room, is very perishable. So if you're implementing, market results to really bring people up to market 3 years out, you're using market data from 3 years ago. So there are certainly some different types of implementation models that we can certainly run. We've had some people do, phased approaches where maybe it's a mid-year adjustment and then, taking into account, what needs to happen with the levy, et cetera, then maybe doing, more of a Jan 1 implementation. That's something that we see actually quite a bit with our Minnesota clients in particular. So not really a multi-year approach, but kind of more of a phased approach because you don't want to use results from 3 years ago to kind of drive that implementation.
In my experience too,
Go ahead.
In my experience too, we did a 3-phase approach when I worked for a county. Excuse me. So we were able to do it over 2 budget years to help move afford the impact to the budget. We did some adjustments. We did COLA adjustments to make up for the fact that it is, by the time you're implementing, it's already old data. So you're already behind again. So we tried to stay on top of it that way. There's ways to work around it, but I think definitely it's gonna be a phase.
Yeah, my question leans towards how do your projected survey results or whatever, how does that tie into like the different union bargaining groups and contracts at different times? How does that fit into all of that?
Yeah, so that definitely depends on how organizations want to kind of address that. We've had it happen, a number of different ways. But certainly, obviously, doing getting all of those results, it's covering, like Jamie mentioned, all positions. So whatever approach, perhaps, and that will be kind of a discussion I think with more the team, what type of approach they want to take. We're certainly happy to assist in whatever that process may or may not be. It's truly kind of an organizational approach with a number of different factors that of course are needing to be considered during that time. But we have worked with organizations that do have a lot of unions. I mean, I think pretty much every client of ours at the moment. I think maybe there are a couple that don't have unions, but most do have unions, and many of us have sat on the other side of the bargaining table as well. So we've certainly worked with organizations on those strategies and also encourage them to work with whoever they need to internally from a labor attorney side, strategy side.
Go ahead, Jim.
For our staff, sort of what our process is currently, obviously I know people work through steps and they get cost of living increases, but is there any ongoing thing of like, you suddenly realize that engineers are making more in other cities and you make adjustments, or is it only through a process like this, however often this happens, that those market adjustments happen?
In the past year since I've been here, we've made a few adjustments already if it's needed.
Okay. Just for new positions or for existing employees too? Okay.
So we implemented a new policy on that to formalize it. And we asked that it be done around the budget time as part of the budget. So if you're asking for a new position, there's a form, and then if you're reclassifying a position, there's a form. But we also make exceptions, like if someone leaves and we're trying to fill that position and we're finding that the comps are just higher, then we're looking at that as well. We also changing about wage and we
We are finding with a lot of our studies, especially studies that are kind of doing studies once the market has like cooled a little bit, there has been substantial market shifts with kind of how the market has played out.
One more, I'm assuming, but shouldn't, the timing is such that this would be wrapped into this year's budget process? Or are we thinking that it would not be until next year?
So right now, we've asked the departments to try and get their budgets in at 3.5%. I can tell you that they're struggling, even without this study, because of inflation and other cost pressures. Mood and I have some funds available to help implement this, but I don't know. I doubt it will be enough. But I don't know. We just don't know until the study is complete. So yes, one of the options, I think what Jamie was referencing is, I understand what you're saying, you don't do it in a multi-year approach, but really for cities it is. If you do it this year in the middle of the year and then you do it January 1, it is a multi-year approach for us and for our budgets and for the levy. So it just depends on what comes out of the study, but likely to be a proposal for this year and then something for next year.
I don't believe staff needed any direction from us at this point. Thank you, everyone. I think we're done then. Adjourn the work session.